Communications Office of Small and Disadvantaged Business Utilization. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are delighted to have you all here. Let me admit a few more individuals to come in. Excellent. My name is Samira Ziwari. I am the Small Business Specialist at the Office of Small and Disadvantaged Office. Okay, I want to make a few comments before I introduce my boss, who will be introducing today's guest. First and foremost, you'll notice that if you're not a presenter for this event, please make sure your microphones and cameras are muted, and conversation will be recorded and uploaded to our website. In the interest of time, there will be no question and answer session. However, we still want your feedback. If you have any suggestions about topics you'd like to hear more about, specific questions you like answered in our future session, or individuals you like to hear from as a small business, shoot us an email at small.business@edu.gov, and we will be happy to consider the content for the series. Please keep in mind that all iterations for the series will be interview-based in nature. You may submit questions through the chat during the event, but we may or may not present them based on timing and flow. Questions not answered today may be answered in a follow-up event. Please kindly mute your mics as you are joining in. Now that you have a better understanding of how this project will run, let's begin. I'd like to introduce you to my boss, Mr. Calvin Mitchell Jr. He's going to introduce you to today's guest of honor. Calvin, over to you.
All right, thank you. And as you're coming in the area here, please make sure that your camera's off. We got, oh, Gabby. All right. So first, thank you to Gabby and Samira for putting this on. This is a way for us to gather around and really understand how to grow small businesses. And we got a good one for you today. We have Mr. Larry Melton from the Building People Company. He has been in business since 2013, correct?
That's right.
And he
9 years this week. 9 years this week, Calvin.
Wow, 9 years this week. Congratulations. But that I got to tell you, Larry came from the federal government. He worked for the federal government, worked for General Service Administration for most of his career, and decided to take a leap. And I say a leap of faith. He decided to leave his government job where he was a senior executive to start his business. Last time we talked, he talked about how nerve-wracking, terrifying. You can insert the blanks as to what exactly he was feeling at that time. But needless to say, it was not a comfortable situation. But Larry believed in his vision, believed in the craft, and left the federal government and started his business. Despite raising a family, despite all that was going on, he took the leap and started his business in 2013, where he started with an employee of one, Mr. Melton himself. And as of last week, or was it this week, you got your 300th employee.
We did. We just hit our 300 employee mark and our 9-year anniversary, all in the same and over the same 2 days this week. So it's an exciting milestone, crazy milestone. Sometimes you're not sure if you're able to get there, right? But when you hit it, you're like, wow, we got there. It's pretty crazy.
So what's fun is that we're going to be talking about business. We're going to talk about how he grew his business. We talked a little bit last time about how he really got to the place that he's at now, which is a 300-person business, multiple contracts in multiple places. He talked about how he got his first contract, and now we're going to talk a little more about the nitty gritty.
Yeah.
We took some of the questions that you guys had provided in the last session, and we're looking. Oh man, we got people still coming in. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Make sure you're on mute, and we don't want to see you. Well, we don't. We do want to see you, but we don't. So turn off your camera as you're coming in. If you look at if Larry and I, we need the spotlight. So if you turn on your camera, then it's gonna blend us out, and we don't need that. So I am, but before I give an official welcome, I'm Calvin Mitchell. I'm the OSDBU Director, and I'm really happy to have Larry here again. And Larry, how's the leg?
It's doing well. Thanks, Cal. And maybe we'll talk about that both as a business owner and what it means when you have a setback, right? Sometimes life throws you curveballs. I got my curveball after 9 years of being in business. I was out of pocket for almost 3 weeks of business, just taking care of my leg. I had an accident, and I'm back at it. I'm back at the office. I got my crutches. I'm hobbling around, but maybe at some point during the conversation next hour, we can talk about what it means to kind of reset, recalibrate as a business owner. Sometimes, when you get those curveballs in life, it's just it's a message that says, all right, you got to slow down to speed up, right?
Yeah, yeah. And before this, I had flipped on the Masters, and much to my surprise, someone else was hobbling. Tiger Woods. I just amazed just last year that devastating car accident, and to think that now he's playing and walking the course. That's inspiration for me, because I'll tell you, a lot of times I get a cart and sometimes I walk. And when I walk, I'm like, I wish I got a cart.
Yeah. Well, wait, I can tell you the analogy there, Calvin, is when I saw Tiger Woods taking the course, and you're right, 1 year after an accident, I certainly wasn't going to stay home and do this. I had to get to the office. I wasn't going to be, that guy who couldn't even get to a podcast in the office, right? When Tiger's out there on the course. Yeah, I'm hobbling in here, but I was like, wow, that's inspiration for sure.
Yeah, that's definitely inspiration, and it's cool that that he's getting to share this, to get back out there. I think no matter what, he's already won.
Yeah.
So is there anything, did I mess up any introduction? Is there anything that I didn't highlight that you would want to highlight? Because I'm not the best with the introductions. I didn't say the ravishing heartthrob of GovCon, but I could have added that.
Yeah, you did great. And I again, it goes without saying, I appreciate this. This is the last one we did. I was actually impressed that we got through that 1 hour and we ran out of time, right?
Right.
I think we were both so energized with the conversation. And I'll just say, Calvin, I think you excited me to let me, as I'm telling the story, I'm reflecting. And sometimes you got to celebrate your success, right? And that was one of the big things at the end of that call. I saw all those questions coming in and I wanted to be able to answer them, but we ran out of time. And we immediately jumped on the line and started talking about, all right, well, let's make a list of all those questions that people threw at us that we didn't get to talk about because it's important, right? And those are really hopefully today we'll get right into the nitty gritty of what really works as a small business, what doesn't. And if I can help somebody along the line kind of thinking differently or getting out in front of it, as they say, then declare victory for both of us, right? But yeah, I mean, there's a lot to talk about. And this is not easy. I always joke, and I think I said this to you last time at the end of the call. Hey, Calvin, if this was easy, everybody would do it. This is not easy. So, yeah, no, just happy to be here. Thanks for having me, Calvin.
So last time we talked, I think we left off with a discussion around getting that first contract.
Yeah.
And we talked a little bit about what getting that first contract looked like for you, right, at ground zero. A lot of what I want to talk about is not only the first contract, but how to scale. But let's talk just for those who may not have been here the last time. Talk a little bit about that first contract.
Yeah. So rewinding the clock, 2013. It was actually April 6th was my first day. April 6th, 2013. I had left federal service on April 5th, and I had gotten a call. And I knew there was interest in me, but separating from federal service and going into the private sector, you got to take a jump and hope that you land something, right? Mm-hmm. I was naive enough, and I'll say maybe I was smart enough, but I had a little bit of money in the bank, not much. I will say, looking back now, I would not recommend you leave with that little money in the bank. It was a huge risk. I essentially had almost nothing, and I said, "Oh, I'll figure it out." That's that maverick approach to how you get into business. And some people that works, some people it doesn't, but it depends on how risk averse you are. But yeah, I got that first contract, and it was really a consulting gig, right? It was someone wanted me for my expertise. And when you start a small business, and I'm sure there's plenty of small business owners on this call and participating, let's be real. When you leave day one, all you have is your resume, your bio, and who you are, right? You are your own marketing machine. So you can say, and back then in 2013, I announced myself as the Billion People. But let's be real. I really was Larry Melton Incorporated. I was one person, one body, one human being, CEO and president of a company of none, right? So but let's be real. So the only thing I had to sell myself on was my credibility, my resume, my experience, and my knowledge. That's it. So the question was, and this is where we took the conversation, was how do you transform that from Larry Inc. and your personal, passion, your beliefs, and what you love, and how do you turn that into a company, right? Or a business? Really, it's more about turning it into a business. And when I got that first contract, it was a 5-month period of performance. It was a small consulting contract. I was a third-tier sub supporting the Army Corps of Engineers to 2 firms, and it worked really, really well. I loved what I was doing. I was able to roll up my sleeves and solve some really complex problems for the Army Corps and working with these teams around real estate and technology. It was fun, and I liked what I did. But then the question was, oh my gosh, that was a 5-month contract. Now what? And as I started getting closer to the end, I got very strategic, and we started writing white papers and getting very big into identifying bigger problems for them that we had uncovered in those first 5 months. And luckily for me, we turned that second one into another opportunity, and another opportunity turned into just a much bigger opportunity. 12-month period of performance, a lot more complicated. I was going to need a little more resource support help getting it done. I had a retired federal employee also who had recently retired, who I think I mentioned to you last time, Calvin, Linda Osgood, who's our affectionately known as employee number 1, still with us as the senior vice president. Linda had a great background and history working in the government as well. So she came over and working part-time with me as a consultant, and we were delivering this stuff. And then you just got smart. And I said, okay, as I do this, you can work hard doing sweat equity, delivering those projects. But the question is, is it sustainable? And how do you grow a business while you're delivering? Eat, kill, deliver. And then you got to build a pipeline, build relationships, go find the next 2-3 opportunities so you can grow. That is the hardest thing in the world, because I got news for you. You're burning the candle at both ends. You're running the business. You're doing everything. You're the CFO. You're the bookkeeper. You're the HR person. You're the IT person. And if anyone knows in small business, what can go wrong goes wrong in IT, right? So nothing works, and you never have anyone to help you. So it's amazing how much you appreciate all the IT help you had in the federal government when you were in the federal government. So hug your IT manager today. All of you who are in there, say thank you to your IT folks, because they're the ones that made your job easy when you didn't have to worry about it. But when you're a business owner, everything's your problem. HR, IT, and the money.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, so you got that first contract, and so we talked a little bit about how subcontracting can lead to other opportunities, and it's really being able to make those introductions, those connections, and leveraging that for other opportunities. And that's so tell us again about that first prime opportunity.
First prime opportunity, and this is where I think we ended up wrapping the conversation up, and we ran out of time, and I think people were really excited to hear this. But yeah, we played in that sub role, and I was never afraid to play in that sub role. And I think I mentioned in the call, I probably gave away more work share and probably at a deeper cost discount than I probably should have. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter. I look back and I said it worked out just fine for me. Sometimes it's not about how much money you make. It's about creating value for yourself and making sure that you get called back, right? Especially in the beginning when you're scratching and clawing, right? One of the first things I did, and a lot of people ask the question of, hey, before you got in the 8A program, which is until 2016, in 2013, I positioned us to get on GSA schedule. And I spent the time to position us to get on GSA schedule. And we were on GSA schedule by 2015, right at the 2-year mark of being in business. By the time we got on schedule, within the first month, we were positioned to get our first prime contract. And part of it was luck. Part of it was, oh my gosh, how great is this timing? I do have a prime vehicle. And they said, well, how do we get to you? And I said, well, I'm on GSA schedule. I think at that point, maybe 2 or 3 SINs on the GSA schedule. Now they call them, the mass consolidation schedule, which is SINs and NACs. So those sins and knacks were my bread and butter for the only way I could sell and make myself available as a prime contractor. Now the question was, how did you differentiate yourself, right? Because when you look at that list and there's 1,000 companies on GSA schedule, especially when it comes to, that O3 fact facility schedule. There's 100,000, thousands in the DC area alone. So how do you differentiate yourself? And that's where I started focusing on, how do I differentiate myself? So I was really lucky that I did the market research for the government, and I said, here's why us, here's our sins, and here's how you can get to us. And the solicitation came out, and we put in for it, and we got it. It was a single award BPA.
Wow.
And we were off to the races.
So would you say too, Larry, part of it again is being able to have that technical capability, building that base, right? Talking to people, right? Knowing people, and then being able to close a deal by having a solution. How do I get to you?
That's right. You nailed it. And in the sequence of events you just explained, Calvin, that's exactly how you need to do it. In fact, I'll even go so far as, I'll use LinkedIn as an example. A lot of people don't realize that LinkedIn is your individual marketing campaign. If your LinkedIn doesn't look great, I got news for you. Why would anyone want to hire you? That is your bumper sticker. Think about that when you're starting a business. That was the only thing I had, was to market myself and who I was. Yes, it was the building people. Yes, I had a big title of a CEO, but no one really knew how big or small the company was. So the only thing you have to do is your credibility. Your credibility is everything. You have to build off what you have done. Let's be real. And I said this to my son, who's a sophomore at Ole Miss, and he's in an entrepreneur program. And I said to him, he said, I want to start a business. I said, then go be credible in something. Be credible in something. I don't know what it is. It doesn't matter what it is, but be credible, because people are going to hire credibility. Imagine if someone came to hire me to be a welder. Well, I don't know how to weld. You want me to be a facility? You want to talk to me about facilities management? I'll talk facilities management stuff all day long. So how do people want to deal? Number one, people do business with people they like. We talked about that, but they're going to hire credibility. So you are your own marketing machine. So when you're starting, don't worry about selling every piece of your business. Sell what you know you're good at and that you can be successful at. And sometimes being that consultant or that subcontractor to a big firm, whether it's Booz, Accenture, or Guidehouse, it doesn't matter. Go do it, right? Go be a sub. Don't be afraid of being a sub. That's great past performance. It could be I joked last time, Calvin, I think I told you, I think one of our first contracts at the Veterans Administration was a $2,500 contract. And, turn that $2,500 into major work. How? Because we marketed that work that it was bigger and more complex than you can imagine. It's how you write it and market it. Again, we marketed ourselves based on our past performance, our credibility, and our passion for what we want to do.
So Larry, both you and I worked at GSA, and we're pretty familiar with GSA. Some may not be as familiar with General Service Administration and the schedules program and the government-wide contract. I always tell people, even before you get into the 8A program, I think GSA schedule is a good place to start, because that will help you to really participate more in that marketplace. But there's been some changes, right? The GSA, when I was there was an initiative to consolidate the GSA schedule.
That's right.
So it looks a little different, feels a little different. It's more aligned in NAICS code. So is there anything that, because you've been in the old system, if you will, and now that this new consolidated system, do you have any thoughts of competitiveness in this space? And is there any tips that contractors should be thinking about?
That's a great question, and I'm gonna answer it twofold. So I'll rewind the clock to the old sin. The old GSA schedule structure had a bunch of sins, and those sins, by design, they're called special item numbers, right? And those special item numbers allowed you to differentiate yourself and really have a niche. So you could make the argument that the more sins you had, the more diversity you had in your offering. That's one school of thought. Another school of thought would say, well, if I had fewer sins, that was my niche. And I was so good at it that I was the go-to company for that. So there's different schools of thought. I like the diversification of get as many as you can. And that was my theory, so that I had more opportunities coming into my pipeline from eBuy when it comes into your mail and you see those opportunities. And now you can see what the government is putting out there for procurement. When you're in startup mode and you get on schedule, you can't afford a big license from a GovWin or Deltek. That's not a complaint. It's just that those are expensive tools for a startup business to have. So when you get on schedule, yes, it costs you money to get on there, but now you've got pipeline of opportunities coming into you that you can actually see how the government is procuring services. You can see what the solutions are looking like. You can do a quicker response on a RFI, and now you can start to track those, and you see where it aligns with your business in a systematic way. You can start to see how much work is coming on one center or the other. So now fast forwarding, you're right, the mass consolidation. What I saw as the biggest differentiator, and it created a little more of a challenge for small businesses, quite frankly. And we did share this with GSA when we were asked at some of the industry days. We shared it with GSA. I was very worried that the elimination of those sins and the consolidation of those sins marginalized the specialness or the creativity that some firms had in a niche offering.
Interesting. I always say, when people come to me, and hopefully no one takes offense, I generally try to get them to not use Deloitte or any of these large integrators, really, because if you want a specific technology, you're more likely to get that from a small business, right? And so I always say that there's price competitiveness, there's innovation, and there's this uniqueness that you get from small businesses, right? Because they're usually focused on a particular offering. So it's interesting that you say that, because the consolidation of the schedule almost changes some of the specific technical capabilities that they could offer. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it did. So, we saw some of those sins where some of those sins, there were 10 of them. And now of those 10, they migrated them, consolidated them. Now there's 4. So let's just now take that list of 4. When you go list that, I said there's thousands of companies on there. When I pull those new NACs or new sin numbers that are consolidated now, there's a lot more companies that are in there that I'm lumped in with that I wouldn't have been lumped in with.
Oh, interesting.
So, yeah, all right, small versus large, that's a different baby. But now I felt like and I still feel this way. And we're going to do just fine using the schedule. I love the schedule. I love the program. I love how it works. It is a great tool for small businesses or anyone out there that understands it really well. It's complicated and it's hard to market and it's hard to understand. But if you've used the schedules right and you understand how to leverage it and market it, it could be an unbelievable tool. But yeah, now, facilities is facilities. So it seems when you look at facilities management, it's all things facilities management. It's not as, I'll say there's a lack of sexiness when you don't see some of the very niche energy or smart buildings integration sins in there that were very niche. Now they've rolled in to broader NACS descriptions. So, you lost some of that. But yeah, so there's fewer, right? So when there's fewer, there's just you get absorbed into the masses, right? And that's my only concern with it. So then the question is, going back to your point, so how do you differentiate yourself now, right? Now you gotta, what is your story? What is your story on how you're gonna be different? Because now you've been marginalized, so to speak, right?
Right,
so
exactly.
If you've been marginalized, then what is your story? You can't differentiate yourself on the special item numbers and the market research and the contract. What is your voice track story? What is your marketing story, right? That's the challenge I would say that everyone needs to start thinking about now, especially as they've been lumped in on schedules. It's hard to tell from one company from another sometimes.
So first, I get this question all the time, and I usually answer it a certain way, but I'm going to ask you, as a successful business owner, you say that it costs money for GSA schedule. Do you have to pay someone to get you on schedule?
Yeah, that's a great question. And here, I'll just tell you this, because I don't call me to pay you to get you on schedule. That's not what I do. No. Yeah, I hate to say yes because you shouldn't. Right? And look, I think if anyone from GSA is on this call in the Federal Acquisition Service, this is not a knock, because those people work their tails off and they're super busy helping a lot of small businesses. But in a perfect scenario, no, you shouldn't have to. You should be able to follow the process. You make the argument that, all right, well, do you need to hire someone to go get your 8A, to go get your HUBZone? And the answer is technically no. There is a process. It's online. It's a repeatable process, an application process. And the goal of both GSA and SBA to get you these designations, right, on schedule or in the socioeconomic class, the goal is to get you on, not to deny you, right? But
Right.
sometimes the process is so cumbersome that you say time is money. And in business, that is very true. I will tell you this. So to answer your question, in the very early stages, we did very much a lot of it on our own initially. And when we first got on schedule, we did everything on our own. And I hired some help internally to get it done, but we did everything internally. As we grew, and we realized the complexity of it, we got most of it done. So 80% of it was done. And then we would hire somebody to get it over the finish line for compliance and getting the things uploaded and making sure the checklist was done. So like I said, it's complicated. You should be able to start a majority of your schedule on your own and then bring in help. If you want to move wicked fast, then yeah, pay. But we got on schedule pretty quick on our own the very first time. But I also, in fairness, Calvin, I always say, and you and I both know this, is I also had a federal government background and I understood the acquisition rules and I understood what they were asking for. So I spoke that language. If you're new to the federal government contract market and you're trying to understand how schedules work, that's probably not the best use of your time as an entrepreneur, and you need to pay someone to get in there and go do it for you. And that's why there's firms out there that do it and do it exceptionally well.
So let's go back and peel back that onion a little bit. So we talked about how the GSA schedule is a great tool to leverage to really market your business and to really penetrate this federal marketplace. I personally tell my contracting officers the schedule is one of my favorite tools. Why? Because I can easily get contractors on there, right? Sometimes if I need to get you on there, I can call GSA and say, hey, can you expedite? But don't get too happy. Expediting isn't, it's not like fast food. It's more like a really nice steak that's really
Right.
that takes a long time to cook, right? So expedite in government terms is not as quick. But I always like the fact that most of what we're doing is commercialized work. It's firm fixed price.
Right.
It's easy to price out. It's easy to anticipate the costs. It allows us the flexibility. We can use, I call it the rule of three, right? And so there gives us a lot of flexibility in terms of competition and in terms of a market value for a small business. Now, how do I pick out myself, right, from the crowd? What are some strategies that you use, right? Because O3 FAC exploded, I think, when I was there, right? In 2015. Was it 2015, 2014, where it went from like 0 to 100 real quick? I think the song goes, right? It just exploded. And Mary Rui and that region, the team and the region were doing a great job. But how did you make sure you differentiated yourself, right? Because we know that this is a good tool, a good entree to really get you into the marketplace. But how do I make sure that I'm seen in a crowded field?
One of the things I did was when you hear the term market research, right? And how many times everyone on this call has heard the term market research, or the government's doing market research, and we see them come, whether it's FedBizOps or GovWin or eBuy. We see the opportunities come out and they say the government is conducting market research, or we get the emails from GSA. When they're doing market research, what they're trying to say is, all right, I don't have time to go out there and search for all these companies myself. So let me just put this market research out there and let me see who replies. And now I've dumbed it down to a streamlined list of people who responded. You can do that. And this is what I love on GSA Schedule. It is not hard to do that yourself. And that's exactly what I did. So when you go onto eBuy and you look, the first thing I would say is if you have a SIN or an ax code or SIN, I want to keep calling them SINs because that's what they still are. Let's call it what it is. If you have SIN,
I used to call it Sin City when I worked at GSA.
Yeah. Very true. Subliminal message there. So when you look at those SINs, let's be real. Is there an easy way to say, all right, how many small businesses have that SIN? How many 8A businesses have that SIN? How many HUBZones? How many woman-owned small businesses? The data is right there in eBuy for you to dumb it down. The search engines are there. So one of the things I did was I said, okay, let me go in and search and do the market research. Who are my competitors there? And I searched it. And then I said, okay, how many are located in my zip code or within 50 miles of my zip code, 75 miles of my zip code, 200 miles of my zip code? I now, if I have a customer, let's just say Calvin called me out of the blue, my phone rang, and it's Calvin from DOE, and he says, hey, introducing myself, I'm a contracting officer, I need a facilities management company, and I see you're located in Leesburg, Virginia. Do you do work in Washington, D.C.? You should be able to and be prepared, and I was, Calvin. When I got that phone call and got those phone calls, and it happens, right? I immediately said, hey, not only am I located in your neighborhood, I'm only 50 miles from you, and by the way, I'm the only 8A small business within 200 miles from your building where you're located in DC. I knew that. So one of the things I did very early on was develop that market research strategy so that by the time you knew you were going to go meet a contracting officer, you should have already given them your market research for you. They should already know, oh, I'm the building people. Here's my market research. Oh, now I know how to get to you. If you're going to make the government come look for you, you're already behind the 8 ball. You need to make it easy for the government to find you. So do the market research for them.
Fantastic, fantastic.
Yeah.
So that's great, and I think that gives a lot of folks the real know-how to really make sure they're differentiating themselves. I think harkening back to our prior conversation, just having that Rolodex. I know for some people who are probably millennials are like, "What is a Rolodex?" Right? Is he talking about a watch? No.
Yeah.
If you have those contacts, right, and you have those contacts, then it's also helpful, right, to really leverage that schedule in that way. This is how you can get to me, right? Oh, by the way, this is how you can get to me. I think we talked a little bit about that last time. So
Yeah.
Just want to shift gears a little bit, Larry, and M2203, equity in procurement. The Biden administration has done a lot of work in this space, and it's gotten a lot of businesses, small businesses, excited. Should we be excited about this? Is there something that we can leverage from your perspective?
Yeah, look, it is exciting because when you look and you see right now the draft language is saying that they're going to increase the thresholds for sole source director from 4.5 million to 8 million for both 8A woman-owned small business and I believe service disabled vet. I can't remember exactly how it's shaken out, but let's just use those for example. I know those two are correct. For woman-owned small business and 8A, they're talking about increasing the direct award authority from 4.5 million to 8 million on a single direct award. And again, that doesn't mean you're limited to one direct award. It's just that they can do multiple. Now, so think this through. All right. So at first glance, when I first saw that, kind of breaking news come across LinkedIn and the Newswire and Federal News Radio, I thought, oh, that's great. And then I looked and I started doing some simple math in my head. I went, wait a minute. If those last 2 or 3 direct awards came in that were 4.5 million, came in at 8, and they're 1 year past performances, okay, that's kind of a problem because then I would have had to, I'm going to grow and I'm going to grow quicker, 3 times quicker in 12 months.
Right.
That sounds great as a small business, right? But when you see small businesses, and look, we had what I think I referred to it as that hockey stick growth. Remember I told you that, and if you look at our stats and you go online, we went like this and it's like, that's great. What you want to do is go like that, maybe go like this, but you don't want to go like this. So the question is, how do you do that? My concern, and I've shared it with some folks in both GSA and SBA and GAO recently. I said, that all sounds great, and I love it. But imagine if you do that, and we already know, and I think I can't remember when the report came out, but there was a recent report that came out that the volume of new small businesses being created, both in the 8A program and women-owned small business program, are down. There were fewer small businesses being created in all socioeconomic classes doing business with the federal government, right?
Yeah,
so it's just a
report.
Yeah, it was a GAO report. So if that number's, think about this, if that number's going down and we are increasing the volume by which they can grow, that all sounds great. So if you were that business owner, you are going to grow faster and you'll get, more revenue quicker. That sounds awesome until you outgrow your size standard and all of a sudden you've gone from 0 to 30 million, and what sounds great on paper, and all of a sudden you now have positioned yourself to graduate as a small business, and now you're a large business because you didn't think through the strategic growth of the next growth impact to growing that fast. So think about this. If you just take the average, if you went from 0 to 30 million, which is really possible, if you got 4 direct awards at 8 million, that's $32 million in awards, right?
Right.
If now, let's just hypothetically say there's a low probability that those are 1 year period of performances, right? Let's just say they're 2 year period of performances. Okay, so now you divide that by 2. Okay, so $8 million, $16 million a year, 32 million. Okay, but your average is now 16 million over those 2 years. If you take 0 to 32 million, 2-year average is 16 million. Now, okay, you're doing a 5-year run rate. Okay, great. Now spread it out, but you're getting more direct awards and you're growing your regular business and you're getting better qualified. You now can be a $20 million size standard business. You've now grown out of the 541-611, which is probably one of the most popular size standards, right?
Right.
541-611, most popular size standard, most popular SIN, and it's a $16.5 million size standard. Just like that, in 2 years, you could outgrow it. I don't think any small business can be prepared for that in 2 years. So I worry. So my concern, to answer your question, is I love it in theory, but there's too many small businesses, and we were very fortunate to grasp the concept of NACS growth strategy very early. And I would encourage, if you don't know, you got to get ramped up on that. This should be such common nomenclature for you every day as a business owner, understanding the NACS growth size standard and how to manage it. If you don't know it, you better learn it really, really quick, because you will outgrow your size standard before you know it if you don't manage it well. And there's nothing worse than growing to be, I'll say, an emerging small business and then not having that infrastructure, which we talked about last time. You know, you can go be a $30 million business, but you're not going to do things well. If you go from 0 to 30 to $50 million overnight, you're not going to do well because you didn't build the infrastructure. You don't have the HR systems. You don't have the payroll systems. You don't have the accounting or the right resources to go execute with precision. And I got news for you. There's nothing worse than one bad CPARS. Right. Yeah. So it's, you got to think all of it through. So I worry, to answer your question, Calvin, it's a great question, is I love the concept of increasing the thresholds, but you can't increase the thresholds without having a direct goal of increasing the NACS size standards to coincide with it, right? Because otherwise what's going to happen is you're going to have all these businesses. Again, the fewer businesses we have, they'll graduate earlier than we anticipate. And that's not going to help small businesses. It's actually going to hurt them. So you'll have more of what I call, the cliff effect happening for small businesses. And that's not good for anybody.
So Larry, let's capture that and let's really hone in on that, because this is a good discussion that we can probably have about growth, right? And what's I guess a growth strategy, or like you talked about how within the NAICS code you should be familiar with what the NAICS code size standards are, know what it is over a certain amount of years, and being able to strategize and grow your company so that you're I don't want to say grow comfortably, but how to grow, right? And it kind of reminds me of my dad. I lived in a country, rural area on the Eastern Shore, and my dad bought me a go-kart. And this go-kart, he was, I would take it out and ride, right? And my friends had go-karts, and they would ride up faster than me. And I would tell my dad, like, can you make my go-kart faster? Can you make my go-kart faster? And then finally, my dad said, fine. So he takes his tools and he's working on my go-kart. He's doing something to it, right? But my go-kart then went so fast, the frame was too light. So my wheels would spin, right? So when I'm racing my friends, the wheels are going, right? And the car and it's not moving, right? But so it kind of makes me think about, okay, well, if we're not careful and we don't have a strategy for growth, we could kind of be like that, right?
That's right.
The opportunity could be there. We could have all the tools. We could have all the opportunities, but we're spinning our wheels in place. So can you talk a little bit about growth strategy?
Man, that's a good one.
How to plan for that, and what as a small business they should be thinking about, right? Because like you said, it would be great to hit a home run, right? But sometimes getting on first base isn't bad either, right? So how do we get there?
Yeah, that's actually a great analogy, because sometimes you spin your wheel so fast you're going nowhere, right? And I joked, I had an advisor who said, so when is enough? Because he saw us growing. We went from 3 to 12 to 24 to 30 to 40, right? And he's like, when's enough? And I said, well, enough equals more. And and that was then, right? And then I said, okay, that all sounded great, to your point of you wanted your go-kart to go faster, right? And then you're spinning your wheels and you're going nowhere. That is actually a real scenario that can happen, because you can work so hard and you end up, and I hate to use the cliche of working harder, not smarter, or you're working smarter, not harder. But that's really what ends up happening. You're working so hard to go after more and you're winning nothing. And one of the things we started to do very early on is, okay, so what are we going after? Do you even know what you're going after? And it's one thing to say we're going to go after all these RFPs, or if you set a threshold and say we're going to go after this many RFPs in volume. But then the question was, one of the things when we noticed a big difference of spinning our wheels and working hard, not smart, we realized that we were putting in a bunch of RFPs and RFIs and our numbers, and we were tracking how many we did, right? And we put those in, and we saw our volume go up, and we saw our win rate go down. And then we also saw the per capita win go down. And we went, wait a minute, what are we doing? We put in more, we won less, and the dollar value went down. So what is going on there? We were working really hard on opportunities that we had no business going after.
Interesting.
So I don't, so is there a method to the madness? The one thing I would say is that you need to look at your organization and you need to look at your opportunities. And there is to your point, is growing to scale, right? And that's the point you're trying to make, is how do you grow to scale? I don't know that there's a recipe for every single. I can't sit there and say, oh, well, here's the formula and here it is, Calvin, and everybody should write this down on their board. But I think the one thing, there's the old adage of what gets measured gets done, right? And you got to measure what you're doing, measure what you're going after, and calibrate what you're going after. And look, I'm guilty. I will tell you, and I know there's some people in our company on their webinar. Thank God they can't come off camera or come off mute, because they would say, yep, he's right. Look, there was a period for the first 5 years of business. If I saw an RFP come in my mailbox, I was already quick to say, yep, we're going after that one. Yep, we're going after that one. It was, I felt like service call Larry, right? Just proposal. Just say yes to everything. And there is a method to that madness. And sometimes that works. And sometimes you go after so many it sticks, but it's not sustainable. It's not. So the goals we have now, and we pay attention to it, because as an emerging small business, first, you don't have it. You have more resources, but you need your resources to be good at what they do and do high quality, so you can go after more complicated RFPs, right? Imagine if I went after the same volume I did then, without the quality control, without the difficulty, and I was doing and I would get, my win rate would probably go up, and I'd be winning a lot of small work. But winning a lot of small work out of a company of our size, you got to go after harder ones, right? How do you exit the 8A program? You can't go after easy work. That's not sustainable. So we're at a point now, and this is the real conversation we have as a company, is let's go after harder work. Let's go after full and open work. Let's position for the more complex work. Why? Because we have credibility. And we've surrounded ourselves with credibility. We've built a brand. I said to a team this morning, we were talking, is, we used to be running a small business. Today we run a company. And there's a big difference in that. When you're running a small business, you're scratching and clawing. So yes, are we a small business? Yes. By definition, we are a small business. But you can't, we're too small to be big, and we're too big to be small. So you got to act big, and be big in your strategy. And look, I said this to an employee the other day, is they said, so, how do we know what we're doing? And I said, well, I don't know if what I'm doing is right. I said, have you ever run a $50 million company? Because it's the first time I have.
Right.
So we'll figure it out when we get there. So the real question is, what are you doing to ask the right questions about what you need? Right. I will not pretend to sit there and say, I've got the secret sauce, Calvin. I'm going to tell you how to get to $150 million, $200 million company. That would be a lie, and you're recording this, so I'm not going to say that. But, so no, it's look, it's a trial and error. You learn it as you grow. But you certainly better learn from your mistakes too, because you will work really hard for not. And it'll go back to your go-kart analogy. You'll be spinning your wheels forever. And look, we are absolutely guilty of it. We've done it. We've been guilty of it. And our goal now is, how do you get more disciplined to not do that, right?
Yeah. Great thoughts, Larry. Thanks for sharing that and being real open with us. So we talked about this idea of business development and diversifying. So we've spoken in the past, and I know you've worked with several agencies. So can you talk a little bit about your strategy and how to diversify? So as you're growing, you want to diversify your portfolio. And I'm sure, there's government, there's commercial, I'm sure there's different agencies. However you want to take this, let's talk about how to diversify, because what's sad in the federal government is programs can go away, right?
That's right.
Federal student aid, they just said, hey, we're not going to do debt collection anymore, right? And there's a whole industry that is no longer with us, which breaks my heart, right? So this happens all over the place, right? Where programs can get canceled, requirements can get canceled. So how to diversify to make sure as you're growing in a sustainable way, right? And that you'll be able to preserve your work in future years.
Yeah. Yeah, when you think about it, you say, okay, so how do I diversify? So the one thing, it's funny because I can use this analogy because we were both there, right? We both came from GSA. I think most people thought when I came out in 2013, they said, oh, well, Larry's going to go after all GSA work and only GSA work. And there was people, I think, probably about 3 years in, I remember people saying, well, is GSA your only customer? And I chuckled. No. In fact, I will tell you, it took me years to get work from GSA.
Wow.
It took us a long time. I think the very first time was a year into it. We got very small work, third tier sub. A year later, we got a little bit more work as a sub, and then we started making our mark, and we were a legit sub. But then we got some prime work. But it took us probably 3 years to do that.
Wow.
In just lesson learned statistically, GSA is not our largest customer. They're one of our largest, and I'm super proud of that because I grew up in GSA, and I love the people at GSA. I love the mission. I love what they do, and I am biased, but I say I don't know if there's an agency of people work harder, and I'm not just saying that, but I do, and that's not to say the DOE people don't, but I'm just telling you that agency works their tail off.
Yeah, especially on PBS.
Especially PBS, and especially when you look at the output and the contribution that people in FAST do for promoting small businesses and growth of businesses as a whole. The vehicles they put out there are designed to help businesses do business with the government. So if not but for GSA, a lot of us wouldn't be doing it. It would be really hard to do business. So cool. I'm grateful for that. But, to go back to the diversification. So the one piece I will tell you is that people should challenge themselves to say, okay, what is my offering? And who in the federal government will buy my offering and why? That's actually one of the things I looked at. I looked at, the CFO Act agencies, for instance. There's 24 of them, right? And I said, all right, so all those agencies have a need for real estate facilities. They have FRPP, Federal Real Property Profile, reporting requirements to OMB in the Hill. There was an accountability of that agency to need to report and do business, right, in this spectrum. So those were targets, right? I didn't have to go just to GSA. There was a lot of other agencies out there, I was actually asked one time so why leave? You had a great job in the government. You love GSA. Why did you leave? And I said, because GSA represents 10% of the federal government's inventory, right? There's 360 million square feet and 10,000 buildings in GSA's portfolio. But think about this. There's 3.6 billion square feet of real estate out there. Wow. So then 90% are across other agencies. So I would say that's how I've looked at things. So my challenge to other small business owners who might be on the call, look at your business and say, who buys my business? That's where category management, and GSA's goal to category management. If you look at how does the government buy these services, look at that, align your business with category management and who's buying it and where are they spending the dollars. If you're not doing that, then you're probably just scratching and clawing. This opportunity here or that opportunity here. And that's easy. Look, that's one way to do it, but it's not going to be strategic. It's going to be very reactive.
That's very good, Larry. And I think it's good for us to be mindful of those elements of really, again, the differentiator, but also thinking about what the landscape looks like, right? Have you experienced engaging with different agencies? Is there a different path, method? Let's say they're looking at maybe a small business looking at diversifying their portfolio. What advice would you give them in terms of working with other agencies? Is there a standard cookie cutter way that each federal agency works, or is it very nuanced? And how can you identify some of those nuanced ways?
Well, yes, they are. First of all, they are all very different. And in fact, I will say agencies in itself, whether it's GSA or Department of Education or Department of Energy, I will tell you that, you guys are dispersed on a national level, right? So you can work in certain regions in an agency too. And even then, it's different. That is a challenge, especially when you're dealing with the same agency and one portion of the country in a region has one way to do things and the other region does it a different way. That is a challenge, and that's hard. That makes it really hard for small businesses to calibrate. And then getting the nomenclature down for contracting officers, like this contracting officer has this style or that contracting officer has that style. And that's going to happen. But the challenge right now is that there is a big difference in the way agencies do work. And let's, a good example, we'll go back to the schedules. Some agencies love GSA schedule. I would love the agencies to embrace the GSA schedules more. They are very inconsistent. And in fact, I will say it's actually a shame. And again, I don't think this is GSA's fault, but I think there is a huge opportunity for agencies to adopt the use of schedules to make it easier for businesses to do business consistently. Mm-hmm. What we find is that when I talk to folks in certain agencies, they don't understand how to execute schedules. So, we've even coached some contracting officers of, hey, let me just show you. Can I point you in the right direction? Can I point you to the great people over in Kansas City and Mary Rui's team that you brought up out in Kansas City? Right. Look, that team is rock solid and extremely, extremely reliable, right? But that's one way. The other thing is really understanding how the agencies are forecasting. I'd say that this is probably something we could probably do a better job of, is looking at the small business forecasting. I think a lot of times even I take for granted forgetting to go back and look at those because that is the roadmap, and it shows the cards at least. And if you try to at least understand where their mindset is, you can get in there and figure out where they're going or look at the patterns. There are some agencies that are getting pushes, and I'm not sure how Department of Education is about it, but a lot of agencies are pushing towards the only best-in-class vehicles. And those are really hard to get on, and then you got to wait for the on-ramp. So that creates challenges for small businesses too, is you got to wait a year, 2 years, 3 years for the on-ramp if you just miss it, right? So there's a I'm not going to use the word disconnect. There is a fragmented approach to how agencies do business with contractors, and that makes it challenging. The real niche is as a small business, figure out what niche you can sell the best at and how you can market it the best and make it easiest, and learn it like the back of your hand. I will say we did, and I can't remember where we ranked. I'd have to go back and look at last year's data. But we went to, I think we're on the top 15 or 20 on the O3 fact for GSA schedule sales. That was not an accident. When I saw that list come out about a year ago, I think it was, I was shocked. I'm not going to lie. I was shocked. I said, oh my God, I can't believe we did that well. But at the same token, I've been sitting here talking to you for the last 45 minutes about how we use that as a go-to-market strategy. This worked. Right. So am I shocked? No. Am I surprised at the numbers and the volume and how well we did? Yeah, I am. But it just shows it works, right? So, and that might not be your strategy. So my challenge to anybody out there would be, what is the easiest strategy for you to sell to your customer, to make market research work, to make it come together, to do an easy acquisition? And then you've got to be knowledgeable in whatever that is so you can educate your customer. Look, the procurement agency officials are buried. There's not enough of them. So they're slammed. They got to go the fastest. Everyone's pushing them to get it done now. The program office is generally barking down their throat that it's late. And there's probably something wrong with the scope and the procurement process, and it's out there. So their hands they're bleeding, right? They're dying. So they're resource constraints, and you got to make it easy for them. So the easier you make it for those contracting officers, the better it is for you, and you'll see a difference.
So COVID-19.
What's that?
I tell you, it's been a tremendous factor for us, right? And really changed the way the federal government has done everything. I remember when I first got to education, we had maybe 13 people of a staff of 30 something that were on telework agreements. Nobody else was on telework agreements.
Yeah.
And some did not want to telework, right?
That's right.
We don't have internet at home, like all like the full gamut. So we know that COVID was a significant impact. And look, hiring people online, Samira, who put this together, and Gabby, who helped. Samira, I just met her for the first time. 2 years we've been working together now, right? That we're in a new environment. How has COVID-19 impacted how you've done business? Because you've been able to still grow during the pandemic. Has things changed for you? What are some tips that you might want to give small businesses?
Well, yeah, that's a great question. And COVID was unbelievable, right? And for us, the initial phase for all of us, especially those doing work in the GovCon, and you nailed it. If you rewind the clock 2 years ago, and I can't believe we can actually say this, but federal agencies, not many federal agencies were excited about their contractors teleworking.
Right.
Pre-COVID, it was, hey, can our employees telework if they're working for you as a GovCon? And there was always that stipulation in the contract that said, well, maybe after 6 months we'll reevaluate it. It depends, right? Then COVID happened, and every CEO came to us and said, you need to start teleworking. Tell us what your plan is. And you got 48 hours to make it happen because we're shutting down the federal building, and you need to be, all your people need to be back online or you can't bill. Okay, how do we do that, right? So you're right. So then we separate, okay, what do we need? How do we resource? And I will tell you that we did, I affectionately am extremely proud of what we did. I say we didn't get the COVID memo because we grew by almost 100 employees over that 2-year period, over that 18-month period. We grew almost 100 employees, which is crazy. And it's really unbelievable. So I say we didn't get the COVID memo because we really said, let's plow forward, let's recruit, let's figure out what we got to do right. Let's stay focused on doing what we do and keep either winning work or keep the jobs for the people. So we were very fortunate we were able to secure the jobs and get everybody to telework. What really changed for us and as a small business where it really impacted us is, and you talked about it, not every employee had all the tools at home. Not everybody, not everybody was getting a cell phone stipend, for instance, right? You didn't need your cell phone. If you were going to a government site, you didn't need a laptop. You used the government furnished equipment. And if you didn't have government furnished equipment, then you needed a laptop. So all of a sudden, people went home with their laptops, but they didn't have the second monitor. People went home and said, oh my gosh, like I'm now sharing an apartment with my spouse, significant other, and my kids, and it's going to be loud everywhere I work. What really did change, and I think everybody, surprised neither one of us, I'm at the office, but you're at your house there, surprised the dog didn't come up and lick you while we were talking, right? Or the UPS person didn't knock on your door, and it's the normal, right? The new norm was it's okay to be interrupted, and FedEx make the dogs bark. We became desensitized to those interruptions, and it became okay. But it took a while. I think the one big thing that changed is people adopted this technology way better. We saw a shift in the very beginning. Nobody wanted to be on camera, right? But now you're kind of a little bit odd if you don't turn your camera on, right? Now it's like, where have you been for 2 years? What do you mean you don't want your camera on, right? Now we don't want everybody's cameras on and mics on now for this, but the point is that 2 years ago it was almost not cool to have your camera on. Now it's like, dude, you turn your camera on, right? How do you do business without your camera on? So things like that changed. The resources, the tools we had to plan for, those were unplanned and unbudgeted items. And those were moments when we started to freak out a little bit. We're like, uh-oh, we see some serious capital costs going up of having to buy equipment and resources for our employees that wasn't budgeted for, wasn't planned for. You weren't going to go ask for equitable adjustments. You just said, well, I got to keep my people employed. And that's the most important piece. So it changed the way I know we had to start planning and said, okay, well, when we go to reentry, we still have people who are going to have to work at home. What is the right tool in the toolbox? What is the standard tool in the toolbox now? Things we're thinking about now is, do we need to start budgeting for the hybrid format forever? And that people are going to need the extra tools and resources at home. Look, you don't have money. You don't have a bottomless pit of money. So you got to figure out, what can we afford? What can't we afford? Where do you draw the line? I think businesses are thinking about that now, is that telework is the norm. The hybrid format is the norm. How do you start to plan for accommodating employees for the future? And let's be real, there's a price for that, right? It's not free, and there is a price for that for the government to be able to have that flexibility, and it's just a new norm. Right. So I think the whole planning of how you onboard employees, what employees need, planning for the tools they need to do their job and do it well, are really important now. And we heard about that before when people telework, but now you really have to do it. I mean, you don't have a choice. You have to plan for it.
Wow, thank you, Larry. Again, every time we get chatting, we're two chatty Cathys.
That was fun.
We really get it going, and it's so exciting.
I didn't even drink coffee before this either.
Well, I ended up having some coffee earlier because I forgot mine this morning. I got so busy. But Larry, thank you so much again for being so transparent. Thank you for sharing your story. We really appreciate it. And thank you so much for all those who attended the call. Let's stay connected. Hope everybody learned something from this. Larry provided a lot of wisdom for us to really learn about how to do business. Thank you again for joining. And again, if you're not in Small Business Customer Experience Tool, please make sure you're in it. And without further ado, this is going to be our Conversations with Cal. Larry, again, thank you so much. And many thank you to Amanda and your team, and many thank you to Samira and Gabriella for helping us out with this.
You bet. Hey, Calvin, thank you to your whole team, man. I appreciate the invite, and just this is fun. I love this stuff, and I appreciate you letting us show our passion.
Thank you. Hey, so much fun. Stay in touch.
Take care.